Breaking news, more dramatic twists in the Solyndra scandal. Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us. Well, emails, of course, last forever. Even though you may think you've deleted them, you hit delete and empty them from your mailbox, they're still there somewhere in the digital stratosphere. So is this kind of a lesson for everybody, especially a president or a CEO, that maybe it's best not to use emails for anything remotely sensitive? Let's ask our panel. We got Mike Norman, Al Lewis, and Megan Carberry. Thank you all for coming in. Good to see you all. Al, first to you. It must have happened to you before, where you thought something was gone, and sometimes it's good that you're able to find it. You thought you deleted it, but maybe we shouldn't write anything sensitive in emails.
Well, I really try not to, Dave. You know, I was thinking about writing a book about the history of embarrassing emails. I mean, if you go back to the internet bubble, you had analysts that were saying one thing in emails to their colleagues, another thing in their reports to clients. You really can't write anything in an email that you don't want the whole world to see. I don't know why the president's office is any exception, but I think Professor McAvoy laid this out pretty clearly. I bet they're able to quash this for quite some time. We may not see those
I think you're
emails
right. I think it's going to be a while, but
library.
I think it is going to go up to the Supremes eventually. Megan, what about you? You must have, Megan, had that experience where you think you're just emailing something to one person. It turns out you're emailing it to a whole group, one of whom you don't necessarily want to see that message. I mean, there are mistakes like that that can happen. That's why I think it's a mistake to put anything sensitive in emails.
Perhaps, although I'm sitting here thinking, is it 1999? Email is like a decade old. The president has a Twitter account, and he's on Foursquare, and he's doing all these other things in public, too. It's bizarre that the law cannot keep up with
it is, but
technology.
Megan, that's the reality. The reality is never before in history has Congress tried to subpoena an email. Never. It's never happened before. This is precedent setting what's happening now.
Right, so it's important to move carefully as this goes through. But I think it's great that the president uses email because we need to operate in the 21st century as a country. So I'm glad he decided to go ahead and do it.
Of course. Mike Norman, by the way, I think he is also the first president to have requested to use a BlackBerry. And so they had to come up with this real special software, you know, thousands of dollars worth of software in order to make sure that it was secure and everything. But Is it a good idea? I mean, when you know, sensitive stuff like this is involved.
Well, when sensitive stuff is involved, it's probably not a good idea because in today's day and age, everything gets recorded, right? But I have a feeling like, and you could see how they pushed for this, and perhaps, you know, there was some fraud or misrepresentation on the part of Solyndra, who maybe presented numbers that were not cracked up the way they, you know, were represented. But I think he thought the deal was going to work. I think he wanted to use it as what ended up to be a very expensive photo op, saying, hey, we're going to make this investment into green energy, and this is part of what my administration stands for. In hindsight, it was a terrible deal. Yeah. It was a failure. It might have even involved some fraud.
Mike, everything. You say in hindsight, but Al Lewis, the fact is that before the deal was passed, actually even before the president came out with that 2010 speech where he talked about how great Solyndra was, there was plenty of information about how bad its business model was.
Absolutely. There was an auditor's report. They put out a going concern statement. They weren't even sure whether this thing was going to make it or not. You know, always read the risk factors before you invest in anything. I mean, they pretty much lay it out. I think when we do see these emails, it's just going to be embarrassing how enthusiastic he was over this company that, you know, everybody knows didn't have the prospects it was claiming.
Absolutely.
It's just like buying a bad internet
twice
stock.
And 3 times and 4 times before you hit that send button, because once you do, it's there forever. Thank you, gang. And we still have a lot more ahead right here on Scoreboard. Breaking news, new information obtained by the committee investigating Solyndra reveals the Department of Energy may have broken the law when it restructured the $535 million loan to the solar company, allowing creditors to move ahead of the government. Let's bring our panel back in. Mike Norman, Al Lewis, and Megan Carberry. Megan, we knew for a long time now. We've known that the 2005 rule, which essentially said that taxpayers come before private investors, had to be sustained, and it was overruled by the Solyndra deal. Something's wrong with that, no?
Well, the details of this deal are of great concern to everybody who's looking at it. I think a lot of people want answers. But what I'm afraid of seeing happen is having this become an issue in the political campaigns next year, where it derails people from focusing on building a new clean energy future, which is at the core of many of our problems in this country.
At the core, Al Lewis, of our governing system is rule of law. And if rule of law is being violated by what happened here, there's a problem. This is the Treasury Department, by the way, that is now investigating.
Absolutely, Dave. And you know, this deal has smelled from the very beginning. And now, as we start to see more and more developments, it smells a little bit worse. If laws were broken here, and you know, we're not in a position to adjudicate that here on television, but you see it getting worse and worse and worse. And yeah, this is already a campaign issue. And this is going to be symbolic because it's solar. But now we're finding out other deals that the Obama administration did as well that have also gone south. You know, I don't know that you know, the president should be handing out money to companies that are basically experimental companies.
Right. Well, again, it's not supposed to be just the president, Mike Norman. It's supposed to be a group of advisors who give him advice, and through all those advisors, he comes to the decision. But clearly, that doesn't seem to be what happened.
He jumped to the front on. Look, he should have sat back, listened to the advice of his advisors, which I think, you know, clearly was saying this maybe was not the best investment, but he got out there, he pumped it. I think it was his way of thinking he was doing something in an area that he felt very strongly about. It's a mess. If laws were broken, we have a process for adjudicating that and you know, to take care of that. But I agree that it could become a major distraction at a time when the economy is really hurting. A lot of people are out of work. We're going into a presidential election cycle. And that's a problem. I find that as a problem.
But Megan, hold on a second, Megan. Isn't this a part, what happened at Solyndra? And you look at all the political influences that were brought into play here. You look at the campaign contributors that were involved in investing in Solyndra. You look at this guy that worked at the Energy Department who apparently was putting pressure on. He also was an investor. That when political considerations trump what's happening to our money, that's a problem. And that is sort of symbolic of all of the stimulus spending that we've seen, isn't it?
Oh, well, I wouldn't say it's true of every aspect of the stimulus, but I think it's a chronic problem with politicians trying to keep their donors happy. Right now in the Republican primary, each of the candidates are zinging things back and forth against each other. Bachmann with Perry on the HPV virus. I mean, people will always find a political reason to throw something at each other.
But again, Al Lewis, isn't this exactly the sort of issue that needs to be discussed in this election coming up, in this election cycle, whether or not this kind of investment is worth our while?
Absolutely, and I think if laws were broken, we need to explore this. You know, this idea that, oh, this is a distraction. Well, yeah, it's a distraction, but guess what? We have to find out the truth in order to move forward. And, you know, listen, this is going to be the other way around with the next president, whoever that may be. We can't have people in Washington having all this power to throw taxpayer money behind losing deals.
All right, by the way,
you're right about
we
that.
are a country of checks and balances, and that's one of the ways we keep things straight in this country. And according to this headline that's coming out of Reuters right now, the Department of Energy rebuffed Treasury's repeated concerns about Solyndra. Again, Treasury was supposed to be one of those checks and balances that apparently was not in play as it should have been in this case. Thanks, gang. Well, it's not just